If you ask anybody what their favorite animated movie is, you'll probably get some answers like Toy Story, Lion King, maybe Shrek. But then if you ask them why that movie in particular is their favorite, one of the things that will definitely come up is the music. If you think of the greatest movie soundtracks of all times, animated movies are definitely going to be up there. But what sets apart the music that's in animated movies versus the other ones? And that's what I want to talk about today, because I think that music in animated movies plays a big part in tying the whole thing together. And it's not to say that the music in live action movies doesn't have the same sort of impact, but I think there's some special stuff going on here when we're specifically talking about animation. So the first thing that I kind of notice when it comes to the music without these is the suspension of disbelief that animation brings. So this is specifically more for diegetic music, which is music that the characters can hear within the universe. Think about like when the characters are singing a song versus when a song is just being played in the background. Us as the audience can hear the song in the background, but we assume that the characters can't. But when the characters are the ones singing it, it exists in their world and ours. Whenever you're watching a live acted out film, you have expectations of how this world works because it looks so similar to ours. You see people that you recognize and places that look familiar. So it's a little bit weird when these familiar things start being unfamiliar, like breaking out into song. This is why first moments in like any musical are always a little bit cringe, because you haven't suspended your disbelief to say, this world works a little bit differently where people break out into song. Contrast that with an animated movie. Yes, sometimes they do kind of look similar to our world, but you can always tell that it is some different kind of universe altogether. Every time you watch an animated movie, you notice some point that this is just drawings or art put together by somebody else and isn't actually real. So just by having to watch the movie, you're already suspending your disbelief to believe that this is a real story that's going on. And having the characters break out into song and breaking into dance isn't that far of a stretch when you're already watching, say, a talking lion. So that's a big advantage that I think animated movies have with their music that actually exists in the universe. But what about the music that exists outside of it, just as like the score that kind of goes along underneath the movie? So it's a bit interesting. If you go to the Wikipedia page for the history of animation, one of the first things on there for one of the first animated movies is about this French dude who basically made a better version of the Zoetrope, created a 15-minute movie. But the interesting part about that is he used a piano to add background music. So background music has literally been at the start of animated movies. But the thing that I think gives it a little bit of edge over live action movies is the way that it completely builds out the sonic world. See, think again to like the live action movies. You have the natural sounds of footsteps, maybe the squeak of a door opening, the actors rustling of their clothes, stuff like that. And that all fills out the soundscape. But when you're working with an animated movie, you have none of that. You have to add all the sounds yourself. And again, animated movies are completely in a different world from ours. So we can really use the sound and background music to build up this world that we're working with. The biggest thing that I think of shows this off really well is the Spider-Verse movies. If you haven't seen them, somehow at this point, they're stylized to look like a comic book throughout the whole movie. It makes some parts choppier to make it look like you're flipping through the pages and adds all these kind of shots that you might see on comic book panels. And it's really well done, and they're building up a super interesting story because we don't live our life as if it's comic book panels, but we can see that these characters are. And the music is helping to do just the same. The music in this movie combines this techno-y kind of modern feel, which fits the main character very well, and the world that he's in with all these superhero sci-fi kind of stuff going on, but also is able to play on the traditional idea of heroes music that we might have seen in like Avengers or Superman. And these ideas that the music is sharing really helps to elevate the movie to a whole new level. Now, of course, I realize that background music in like live acted movies can still play just as big of a part as setting the whole world. Think about Star Wars, for example. That has one of the most iconic soundtracks of all time, and it's fully live action. And while it's still doing a lot to help introduce us to this world, this new space world that we're in, I think animated movies are able to pull on this a lot more because they are usually in a lot more different of settings. And maybe it's a live action movie that's trying to do it with a little bit more of a budget and not going to be doing a bunch of sci-fi and space effects. They're probably going to be having a movie that's a lot more based in a world like ours, and the music plays a little bit of a less important role when doing so, because we're already established to our world that we might see from a live action film in a different way than we would with animated. And the animated music basically just helps close that gap faster. I think that's really good. And if you pick a really good song or piece of music to have in your animated film, it can raise both of them to be S tier level. One of the biggest examples I think of when it comes to this is the SpongeBob SquarePants movie. Throughout the whole movie, they have this little silly song for I'm a Goofy Goober, which plays at the restaurant, it plays at the bar that they try to break into, and they sing it when they need to encourage themselves. But at the end, when SpongeBob's finally standing up to Plankton, he screams it out and it becomes this hard rock anthem. But the animated visuals that go along with it basically turn it into a crazy music video. Yeah, you could make a music video with like a live action stuff with all the actors, but it would feel way more out of place. Having it be this animated one, you can have so many crazy stuff going on. You can have SpongeBob just randomly flying around, jumping on top of the earth. That one sus part with Patrick, maybe don't add that. The two parts work together and just bring it all together, and it's so good. And the last thing about why I think music is so important to animated movies is a little bit unfortunate, but it sells well, because usually animated movies are marketed towards kids, and what kid doesn't love their music? I'm sure the people who make these movies have to think a lot more about adding in songs that kids can sing to get them to be more obsessed with the movies. I think it'd be a lot better if they were adding in the music where the movie specifically feels it needs it, instead of just having to add it in because big studio said so. But even when considering that, it's good to see that so many of them at least try to put in a good effort into making songs that actually lift up the movie and don't just get tacked on. So obviously music is very important to any medium, but hopefully now you have a better idea of why I think music is so important to animated movies as well. Boy, we sure don't talk about animated movies a lot on this channel, but we're going to for this month. That's right, friend of the channel Baby Giraffe has invited me and a couple other channels to take part in the March Movie Madness tournament that he usually hosts. So basically how it works is on the community tab of his YouTube channel, we'll post a head-to-head poll from the 64 style bracket from all 4 studios. So it'd be Disney, Pixar, DreamWorks, and then everything else. And then you as the audience get to vote on them for which movie you think is better. And then so for this year, I made the everything else tier, picked 16 movies, not the ones that I necessarily think are the best, because Norm of the North is on there. But all throughout March, you'll be able to vote on these community posts for which movies you think are the best, and they'll go head to head with everyone else's channels at the end of the month. If you think this sounds like a pretty cool idea, you can follow the other people who are going to be sharing the different brackets, so the DreamWorks, Disney, and Pixar, and I'll have their channels linked down below so you can keep up with them as well. It's a pretty fun event, and if you don't care, just don't look at the community section. It'll be done in March, but I think it'll be pretty fun. And also, please vote for Brave Little Toaster. I'm trying to glaze it. That's why it's up against Norm of the North. Well, my first recording of this accidentally got deleted, and now it's March 1st, and I was hoping to have this video up by March 1st. So I will now go and try and edit it in 2 hours when inevitably making myself crash out. Bye.